Amazing revelation, CEO's daughter urgently ran to Janitor. His incredible skills saved her mom. Sarah stood paralyzed at the edge of the bustling gala, her designer heels clicking nervously against the marble floor as she scanned the crowded ballroom. Glittering chandeliers cast a golden light, illuminating the elite of New York City, their laughter echoing like a siren call to a world she felt increasingly detached from. She fought the constricting feeling in her chest, the expectation to smile for the cameras, the perfect daughter. She yearned to dissolve into the anonymity of the night, but the weight of her lineage forced her to stand tall, even if it felt like suffocating authority. The gala was not merely a social gathering, it was an arena. An arena she had been groomed to excel in, where even a moment's slip could reverberate through the industry, threatening her family's esteemed legacy. But behind the facade of luxury lay an unsettling truth. She felt the silent pressure to prove herself, not just as a competent professional but as an extension of her father's power. It was exhausting. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Her mother lay collapsed on the glittering floor, her elegant gown sprawled like a wilting flower. Panic surged in Sarah's veins, overriding her emotional paralysis. She fought her way through the stunned guests, desperate to get help. In that chaotic moment, she caught sight of an unassuming figure, Mr. Thompson, the old janitor who had always offered her a nod of encouragement in the shadows. "Mr. Thompson." She called frantically, her breath hitching as urgency overtook her. His wise, wrinkled face turned toward her, calm in the storm, and for the first time, she noticed something unfamiliar in his eyes, a depth of experience that surpassed his current role. Without hesitation, she implored, "Please, my mother needs help." The noise of the crowd faded, leaving only her voice, a raw plea laced with desperation. To her astonishment, he acquiesced. "I used to be a paramedic, ma'am," he said quietly, yet authority brimmed in his voice. Her heart raced. Why had she overlooked him all this time? As they made their way back, the gala's ambience shifted again, guests unable to reconcile their disdain for a janitor with the admiration they felt as he tended to her mother, his hands conveying confidence. A swell of indignation rose within Sarah. She had always seen Mr. Thompson as just the janitor. Now, as he unobtrusively saved her mother, that misconception battered her. Before she could fully process it, the onlookers erupted into applause, confusion intermingled with awe. She felt their eyes cutting into her, each one reflecting her internal struggle. Would she combat her upbringing's implicit bias or slip back into the comforting cocoon of her privilege? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Caught in this whirlwind, Sarah was engulfed by the memories of the values she was raised with, wealth hierarchies and social status woven into her identity. The applause morphed into a deafening roar. Her mother's faint smile broke through her turmoil, and beneath it lay a devastating realization. The world saw Mr. Thompson not as a savior but as someone beneath her family's stature. What did that make her? As she stood there, paralyzed, weighing her options, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Cold dread washed over her, news from her family demanding her attention, threatening to drag her back into the suffocating expectations of her lineage just as she stood at the precipice of self-discovery. Torn between loyalty to her family and the urge to uplift the unexpected hero before her, Sarah felt the barriers of her existence crack. Would she speak out for Mr. Thompson, or retreat into the embrace of her father's empire? The clock ticked louder, each second amplifying the stakes, and Sarah knew the moment of choice loomed, more vital than ever, as darkness began to close in around her. The applause faded into an unsettling hush, amplifying Sarah's inner turmoil. Her heart thudded as she weighed the potential repercussions of her next move. The eyes of the room felt like an interrogation, each filled with unspoken judgments and expectations. Would they perceive her as the ideal daughter if she recognized Mr. Thompson's merit? Or would they see her as a traitor to the status quo, betraying the carefully constructed narrative her father had built? Dare to challenge the narrative, a whisper inside her urged. It was a revolutionary thought, a breath of fresh air amidst the musty old norms that had surrounded her upbringing. But the very thought sent ripples of anxiety through her system. Could she really step into the unknown when there was so much at stake? Sarah, a cold, authoritative voice broke through her contemplation. It was her father, a towering figure with a commanding presence, pushing his way toward her through the sea of people. What happened here? His brow furrowed as he processed the scene, and Sarah's stomach churned. The need to protect her family mingled violently with the urge to stand for what was right. Before she could respond, her father's gaze shifted toward Mr. Thompson, and his expression soured. "Do not let this man touch you. He is just a janitor." The disdain echoed in the air, and Sarah felt like a rag doll caught between two worlds. "Dad, he has saved Mom's life." The words shot out before she could trap them. Everyone turned to her, shock rippling through the attendees. She had never stood against her father's opinion publicly before, let alone with such fervor. "Saved her life?" He scoffed, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "That's not how things work, Sarah. We've built this legacy on reputation. This man will not know." Sarah interrupted, her voice quivering between anger and desperation. It was time to confront every expectation, not just for her but for the man before her who had shown such integrity. He has experience, and right now he is the one who knows what to do. He is not beneath us. The soft murmurs of the audience grew louder as her declaration struck a chord among some. But for every sympathetic glance, there was an affronted look from the elite who held on to their rigid hierarchy. Mr. Thompson, sensing the shift in dynamics, stepped closer to her, his voice low but steady. "You don't have to do this for me, Sarah. It's easier just to let them continue." His eyes held wisdom, but in them, she also saw fear of being beat down once more. "No." It was a word that resonated more than she anticipated. "If I back down now, I'll only be shielding the lies." For the first time, the weight of her family expectations felt lighter, almost ethereal, as determination ignited within her. In that instant, Sarah felt the cracks in her carefully curated world widen. This was not merely about defending Mr. Thompson anymore, it was about reclaiming her own identity. She had lived under the label of success without agency, an object of her family's ambitions. It was time to redefine her narrative. As she faced her father, the applause had transformed into an unsettling silence, each spark in their eyes igniting both fear and hope. "Today is not just about legacy, Dad," she continued, standing firm against his authority. "It's about integrity." With her defiance hanging in the air, Sarah knew her life would never be the same again. It wasn't just about recognition for Mr. Thompson, it was her own awakening to the power of choice, and the realization that she could forge a path defined by her values. But just as clarity settled over her, another vibration pierced through her thoughts. It was a message demanding her attention, a clear reminder from her family that they expected her back into their fold, back into their way of life. The ultimatum loomed, and the fear of losing her familial ties mingled dangerously with the exhilaration of newfound independence. This was only the beginning of her confrontation, and the choices ahead were becoming more complicated. The moment of truth felt daunting. But deep down, she sensed it was a passage toward her real self. Could she bear the weight of both the expectations and her growing convictions? The stakes were rising, and Sarah could feel it. This wasn't merely about changing perceptions, it was about her own right to be heard as a person, not just a title. The next phase of her journey was ahead, but what complications awaited on the horizon? The silence in the room was oppressive, punctuated only by the measured breaths of those who had witnessed the confrontation. Each glance toward Sarah felt heavy with judgment, swirling like a tempest around her. With her heart racing, she pulled her attention back to Mr. Thompson, who stood there, his presence surprisingly comforting amidst the chaos. A moment of shame washed over her. What if her father was right? What if this set her family's reputation on a downward spiral? The looming doubt clawed at her resolve, but she held on tightly to the embers of determination that ignited within her. "Sarah! Her father's tone was harsh, a command rather than a plea. This foolishness ends now. You need to step back and remember who you are. But who was she? The question echoed through her mind, demanding an answer. The flawless daughter, the heiress, the obedient reflection of her family's legacy? Or the woman who dared to rewrite her story in pursuit of authenticity? As she grappled with this conflict, a part of Sarah wanted to retreat to the safety of her father's expectations, where she wouldn't have to bear the burden of judgment alone. Yet, another part of her, a stronger force, urged her to stand firm. This was a pivotal moment. She had already declared her beliefs, and to step back now would mean losing the resolve she had just awakened. She lifted her chin, locking eyes with her father. I will not back down, and I will not be silenced, her voice steadied, vibrating with defiance. If being a part of this family means abandoning what's right, then perhaps I need to reconsider what family means to me. The murmurs morphed into hushed whispers filled with astonishment, hanging in the air like an electric charge. Here stood a girl learning to embrace her power, standing amidst a sea of tradition that resisted change. For the first time, she sensed the faces of her audience shifting. There was admiration, subtle approval blooming in the corners of the room. Think of your mother. Her father pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. What will she think when she hears about this? At the mention of her mother, a sharp pain twisted in Sarah's chest. The connection to her mother had always been a fragile thread bound by ideals of perfection and societal expectations. She envisioned the fragile woman who had once seemed so content to play along with the life planned for her, perhaps even to the detriment of her own happiness. The thought struck her with clarity. Mom deserves more than to be a part of a legacy that values reputation over life itself, Sarah responded. If we don't start re-evaluating our beliefs, how can we ever truly grow as a family? She looked at Mr. Thompson, who had stood silent, an unassuming anchor amidst the storm of familial chaos. For the first time, she was unsure of the perception he held of her actions, and a flicker of concern passed through her mind. Was she now abandoning him? Mr. Thompson, she called out, turning her focus back to him, I want to help you. We can show them the truth together. A wave of murmured conversations rippled across the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably, clearly taken aback by this plea for justice. Sarah swallowed, feeling the quickened pulse of her heart affirm her choice. Together, he repeated, a hint of a smile breaking through the lines of uncertainty on his face. You do that for me? Was this the true foundation of courage? The willingness to stand alongside someone not of privilege, to illuminate the power of collaboration? Feeling her confidence swell, she nodded resolutely. But even as she embraced this revelation, the message lingered in her pocket, buzzing with urgency. The ultimatum was still there, waiting for her, ready to remind her of the ties she risked severing. Would her push toward truth fracture her own family even as she sought to build a bridge for Mr. Thompson? As she prepared to speak again, the anxiety coiled tighter. I have to make a decision, she thought, setting her jaw against the rising tide of uncertainty. The pivotal moment awaited just beyond the horizon, and she felt the urgency to act. Each decision would determine her future, as well as Mr. Thompson's. How far was she willing to go in her fight for integrity? With the stakes increasing and the ground shifting beneath her, Sarah braced herself. The impending choices would mark the true beginning of her journey, a passage that could either empower her voice or extinguish it altogether. But one thing was certain, she would not allow injustice to continue without a fight. The time had come to face not only her father's expectations but her own deep-rooted fears. A storm was brewing, and its winds would either carry her to newfound freedom or sweep her back into the shadows of her family's ambitions. The room buzzed with murmurs that felt like echoes of her proclamation, bouncing off the walls in a frenzied rhythm. Time slowed as she prepared to face her father once more, but the intimidating weight of his gaze only deepened the storm brewing inside her. The ultimatum in her pocket pulsated like a heartbeat, a cruel reminder of her precarious position. Sarah, don't do this, her father's voice faltered, shifting gears from command to concern. We'll figure it out. Your mother needs stability, not uncertainty. Her mother needed strength, she thought, not the weariness that comes from walking on eggshells in a gilded cage. Clenching her fists, Sarah forced her thoughts to crystallize. Clarity emerged from the chaos. Her path was not just about her actions, it was about the essence of the woman she aspired to be. "Dad, I can't just sit and watch as the world gets trampled by our family's ideals," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "What legacy are we truly crafting if it ignores those who suffer?" A flicker of something unmistakable crossed her father's face: fear. Fear for her, for their family, and for the comfortable narrative they had built around themselves. But as she looked beyond him, into the crowd of onlookers, she saw the glimmers of hope reflected in Mr. Thompson's eyes. "Sometimes, the greatest inheritance is the courage to speak the truth," Sarah continued, drawing from an inner reservoir of fierce determination. In that moment, she felt the shift from a daughter seeking approval to a woman claiming her voice. Stepping down from the metaphorical pedestal of her previous role, she engaged those gathered around her. "We are here because we care. We cannot hide behind our privilege while lives are at stake," she stated, her heart racing with the cadence of her speaking truth. For every incredulous stare, every hint of disbelief, the heat of her conviction surged within her. "Who will stand with me?" she challenged. The question hung in the air like a dare. To her surprise, a few heads nodded, hesitant, but resolute. This was more than a moment of rebellion, it was a movement toward something empowering. Those glances of admiration transformed, uniting her with people she had hardly acknowledged moments prior. "Mr. Thompson, you've been fighting for change, for justice," she said, drawing him into the circle of newfound alliance. "Help me amplify our voices. Together, let us challenge the narrative." The roots of teamwork began to unfurl, intertwining their hopes and strength. "Yes," he replied, excitement breaking through his reticent demeanor. "There are stories that need to be told, and if we do this together, we can change things. I've seen what's possible when people unite." As they solidified their alliance, Sarah felt a sense of belonging for the first time, not rooted in family ties but in the raw authenticity of shared purpose. The rush of solidarity tempered the storm inside her, granting her the clarity to envision a path forward, albeit treacherous, but the message still buzzed in her pocket, and with each passing moment, she knew she would have to confront the ultimatum. Was she prepared to sacrifice her ties to her family for the pursuit of integrity? As much as she yearned to dive into this new alliance, pulling away from her family's expectations was a frightening prospect. "Do you understand what this means for you?" Her father slipped back into the role of protector as he stepped closer, desperation riding the edge of his voice. "You could ruin your future." In that instant, the chains of expectation felt heavier than ever. She raised her chin, something primal stirring deep within her. "No, Dad. This is my future, and I refuse to let it be dictated by fear." The tension crackled between them, both knowing that this moment would shape their lives irrevocably. She felt the anticipation, the impending confrontation looming like a thunderstorm. Would she stand firm, blazing a trail of change, or would she collapse under the weight of familial wrath? The choice ahead was hers to make, but the stakes were higher than ever. As Sarah stepped forward again, she realized that the teetering balance of familial loyalty and personal integrity demanded not just courage, but action, and in the depths of her heart, she understood this was the beginning of a battle, not just for justice for Mr. Thompson, but for everything her own life could be. The crescendo of loyalty and revolt thundered in her heart as she declared, "I will not be part of a legacy that thrives on silence." As the room pulsed with fragmented energies, her thoughts drifted back to the ultimatum. The ground may tremble beneath her feet, but she resolved to extinguish the fear of what it meant to speak her truth, but would her father's influence spread like wildfire, burning down her dreams before they had the chance to bloom? The uncertainty tightened its grip around her, holding her breathless in the face of fate. How powerful could she be when the very foundation of her identity was on the line? The silence that enveloped the room felt deafening, amplifying the uncertainty that lingered in the air. Sarah's heart raced, the daunting ultimatum still buzzing in her pocket, but alongside it surged the newfound authority she had just discovered within herself. This was no longer just a confrontation with her father, it was an assertion of her own worth and purpose. The stakes had shifted dramatically. She turned to Mr. Thompson, his presence grounding her. "What's our first move?" Her voice was steady now, a stark contrast to the apprehension that had gripped her moments before. "We need to create transparency," he replied, enthusiasm illuminating his features. "The people need to know what's happening behind closed doors. You're a bridge between worlds, Sarah. Your voice could amplify the truth." The word truth resonated deeply within her. In that moment, she recognized how her privilege could be a tool, not just a shield. The juxtaposition of opportunities she had compared to the struggles of those she aimed to support ignited a sense of urgency within her. She had to challenge the ideals her family had upheld, but equally, she had to navigate her way through the murky waters of their expectations. As she contemplated their next move, the reality of her father's ultimatum loomed ever closer, a chilling reminder of what she stood to lose. A life of simplicity and security beckoned from one direction, while a new, uncertain path lay ahead, bright with the promise of integrity but fraught with emotional peril. "Mr. Thompson, you mentioned stories needing to be told," Sarah said, an idea taking shape. "Let us gather those most affected. They should speak for themselves. Their narrative should be the focal point." Her mind raced with excitement and purpose, envisioning how she could curate these testimonies. Each voice would become a weapon against the silence she had sworn to dismantle. In her heart, she felt the burgeoning of a mission that transcended personal rebellion. This became about humanity, about restoring dignity to those marginalized by the very power she had once depended on. "Absolutely," he said, and she noted his appreciative nod. It felt as if they had ignited a spark, a burgeoning partnership built on shared goals and mutual respect. Just as they started planning logistics, her phone buzzed again, the message from her father, demanding her presence immediately. A sickening knot wrung her stomach, and she felt the relentless pull of familial obligation clash violently with her desire for agency. "Do you think we're ready to bring people in?" she asked Mr. Thompson, anxiety creeping into her voice. The doubt gnawed at her, questioning whether she could truly navigate this duality without crumbling. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Trust in your own power. This is bigger than one family. It's about every family that has lived in silence. You have the ability to shape this narrative." His faith in her struck a chord, amplifying the stirrings of confidence within. The fear of backlash from her father felt suffocating, but this new focus gave her the strength to confront it. With this alliance, she felt fortified for the battle ahead. In that moment of resolve, Sarah believed she was becoming the woman she wished to be, brave, unyielding, and true. But visions of her family's wrath lingered in the shadows, flickering uneasily. The thought of her mother, caught in the middle of the impending storm, filled her with an ache that was hard to endure. "We need to act tonight," she said, her voice firm. "We'll meet at the old community center. Let us harness our experiences, and rise together." With plans in motion, she walked out of the shadows of doubt and into the glow of purpose. But as she stepped into the unsettling night air, surrounded by a medley of emotions, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking towards both incredible revelation and heartbreaking loss. Now, with the path laid out before her, would she stand firm against the familial tide, or would the past come crashing back to reclaim her? The answers lay just out of reach, waiting for her to confront the remnants of her former self. As Sarah stepped into the cool night air, her senses sharpened. Clarity began to emerge amid the swirling chaos within her mind. Each breath felt heavy with expectation, a constant reminder of the two paths that lay before her, the suffocating security of her father's world and the uncharted territory of authentic engagement with those she sought to uplift. She turned her thoughts inward, the legacy of her upbringing clashing with her newfound determination. The community center was a fading symbol of hope. Once vibrant, it now stood as a sanctuary desperately needing revival. "What if I fail?" she instinctively whispered to herself, the back of her mind echoing her father's familiar warnings. The thought curdled her stomach, but nestled within that doubt was an ember of resilience, reminiscent of those evenings spent in her mother's garden, planting seeds of various flowers and watching with pride as they blossomed. This will not just be a gathering. It is planting seeds, she realized, acknowledging just how potent her role could be in nurturing these stories. The line between privilege and responsibility began to blur, creating a new moral landscape. Arriving at the community center, she felt a quickening pulse beneath her skin. The lights flickered dimly, illuminating the dilapidated walls painted with memories of long-forgotten events. A small group was already gathered, their faces reflecting apprehension mingled with hope. Sarah's heart swelled as she recognized the depth of their experiences. This feels right, she thought, eager to give them a voice that was so often silenced. Thank you all for coming, she offered, her voice carrying an unexpected steadiness. As they turned to her with earnest eyes, she could feel the gravity of her purpose start to settle in. We are here to share our truths. With each narrative shared, piece by piece fell away from her previous self, revealing the core of who she wanted to become, a catalyst for change, yet amidst the compassion and yearning to uplift, fear still lurked. The looming specter of her father's power threatened to overshadow these fragile truths, knitting an unsettling tension into the fabric of her ambition. Each story shared was a step forward, and yet every confession wrestled with the weight of her family's name. As the night unfurled, voices rose in a symphony of resilience. One elderly man spoke of the struggles he faced in maintaining his business, which had been suffocated by the very policies designed to support success. A mother detailed her battles with the educational system, often finding herself in a corner, forced to defend her child's right to a quality education. These stories ignited a fire within Sarah once more. They were a direct challenge to the narratives woven by those in power, including her father. I'll make sure this is heard, she vowed in her mind, steeling herself for the confrontation that loomed ahead. In the midst of the gathering, her phone buzzed again, this time a call. It was her mother, a voice she could never silence, even amid the chaos. Sarah, please come home. Your father is worried. The lilt of her mother's voice tugged at Sarah's heart, but something darker echoed beneath the surface. Was her mother afraid of the repercussions of her father's reaction? Mom, Sarah hesitated, torn between her family's demands and the growing movement she had now committed to. The stakes were rising, it no longer felt like just her future on the line. If she walked away, she risked forsaking not only her newfound purpose but also the very people whose lives depended on the truth being told. The urge to flee and mend family ties clashed violently with the duty she felt toward those who had entrusted her with their stories. As murmurs and hopeful laughter reverberated around her, she grappled with the stark realization that she was stepping into uncharted waters. This journey is fraught with peril, she acknowledged. But within that danger was also the potential for transformative change, both for herself and the lives around her. The moment of truth was palpable, a precipice beckoning her forward. Would she choose to confront the past, or risk everything by forging an entirely new identity? The decision weighed heavily on her as a cloud of uncertainty loomed, waiting to test her resolve. As she clutched her phone, she knew that in this critical juncture, her next move could reshape her narrative in ways too profound to anticipate. As Sarah stood in the fading glow of the community center, a cacophony of voices enveloped her. Each narrative spoken was a thread, intricately weaving a tapestry of pain, persistence, and poignancy. These stories erupted from the depths of the heart, and in their raw honesty lay a reservoir of strength, both theirs and her own. She never anticipated how quickly she would become enmeshed in their truths, yet as the moments passed, she felt an undeniable spark of purpose igniting within her. With her father's voice ringing in her head, a creeping dread coupled with a staunch resolve emerged. What if I let them down, became a haunting refrain. But among the fears lay the infectious resilience of hope, pushing her forward even when doubt threatened to pull her back. It was unsettling to feel this duality, the connective pulse of community drawing her closer to something greater than herself, yet dauntingly distant from her family's expectations. Each story she heard breached new territories of empathy, unraveling the complexities of lives dictated by systemic constraints. A girl recounted her struggles with mental health, feeling invisible among the throng of expectations. A veteran reflected on the scars of war, both seen and unseen, and how the world continued to overlook his sacrifices. Their vulnerability fortified Sarah's resolve. How could she, burdened by her lineage, turn her back on such powerful truths? When the gathering concluded, reluctant applause echoed against the cracked walls. Sarah found herself inadequate in her own skin, pressed beneath the enormity of what she had just witnessed. As she stood absorbed in her thoughts, a figure approached, an older woman with kind eyes and wild gray curls. Maria, she introduced herself, extending a warm hand. "You have a gift, dear," Maria said, her voice a soothing balm. "Listening opens doors. Don't underestimate your role here." The sincerity in her words felt like a lifeline. Was this the affirmation she desperately needed to step away from the shadow of her father? Sarah grappled with feelings of authority and insignificance, the pride of her lineage sparking an internal conflict that begged for resolution. "How do I make this meaningful?" Sarah asked, seeking clarity that eluded her. "Lead with authenticity," Maria replied. "Your past doesn't dictate your future. It can be a bridge, not a barrier, if you allow it." With those words, Sarah felt the ground beneath her shifting. The power of authenticity lingered in the air, and for the first time, she sensed the possibility of merging her personal history with a newfound purpose. Taking a deep breath, she resolved not to shy away from who she was but to embrace the lessons her upbringing imparted. The whispers of her mother's anxious words still echoed in her mind, but now strengthened with a budding determination. "I'll find a way to balance both worlds," she thought, contemplating how she could harness her privilege to effectuate change. As the community center quieted, Sarah could almost feel the momentum building around her. Her heart raced with the thrill of uncharted possibilities. This was about more than just her. It was about lifting those who had been rendered invisible, giving voice to their unheard narratives, and challenging the status quo. Determined, she pulled out her phone. The time had come to confront her father, not in rebellion but in solidarity with the truth she had cultivated that evening. "I need to understand his perspective," she mused, "and challenge him to consider theirs." Sarah stood at a crossroads. Her heart heavy with the weight of familial bonds and the impending confrontation, she pondered the fragile intersection of her identity. Could she articulate her vision without losing her family? With a deep breath, she pressed dial. The second stretched into eternity as her father's voice emerged on the other end, laced with concern. "Sarah?" "Yes, Dad. We need to talk." And just like that, she was on the brink of not just a conversation, but a potential reckoning that could redefine everything: her purpose, her identity, her family. What awaited her on the other end was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the moment had arrived for her to confront the narrative of her life head-on. Would her father accept this new chapter, or would it be the very thing that fractured their relationship forever? The rhythmic beeping of the call waiting pulse threatened to drown her out as Sarah clenched her phone tighter. Her father's voice rang with a mixture of authority and care, but she felt the distance of their worlds keenly as she prepared to breach the chasm between their expectations. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about the stories I heard tonight," she began, her voice steady despite the tumult inside her. She could hear her heart pounding against her ribs. This was the moment to bridge their differences. "There's something important I need to share." There was a pause on the other end, and in that silence, Sarah felt vulnerability creep in. Was he bracing for a tirade? Would he dismiss her newfound convictions as naive or ungrateful? Anxiety snaked through her, but she forced it down, centering herself in her purpose. "I want to talk about the people who are struggling, the ones whose voices get lost in the shuffle." "Sarah," he interjected, his tone shifting in a way that caught her off guard. "You know I always want what's best for you. But be realistic. We can't fix everything. Some people don't want to be helped." His words stung, and she felt the weight of his skepticism, the weight of her own privilege. She could picture him in their comfortably furnished office, perched in his leather chair, viewing the world through a lens of corporate success that was at once admirable and suffocating. "But what if we could?" she challenged, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. "I'm not sure what you're getting at." His confusion twisted into defensiveness. "You have your own responsibilities. Maybe it's time to think about your future, not just about theirs. The determination that flooded her chest felt electric. But helping them is part of my future, my responsibility as well. I've seen the way systemic issues suffocate hope, how the lack of resources can silence even the loudest cries for help. Each word dug deeper into the conversation, and she dared to defy the quieting forces of paternal authority. You taught me to be a leader, but a leader must listen, not just enforce. Silence hung heavy, and she pressed on. What good is success if it perpetuates a cycle of marginalization? I refuse to accept that we should just turn away from those with stories aching to be told. Sarah, his voice softened, betraying confusion mixed with a hint of admiration. Dad, I know change is scary. But embracing their narratives could shape how I lead. It can redefine the family legacy without dismissing it. She paused, carefully laying her next thought on the table. You always said that knowledge is power. So why should access to that knowledge be restricted to a select few? I understand your passion, but this isn't just about you. This affects our entire family. Her breath caught for a brief moment. And that's exactly why I must pursue this. If I can use my experiences to empower others, I can preserve our family's name differently, one that values the marginalized instead of simply stepping over them. His silence was heavy with contemplation, and Sarah sensed a shift in the air. Had she hit some unseen nerve? Would he reconsider his perspective? Maybe you're right about what a leader should do. There was a flicker of something in his voice, a hesitant acknowledgement. But how can I support you in this? I don't want you to lose your way. The weight of those words doused her anxiety, only to ignite a new flame in its place, opportunity. Could they forge a path forward together, or would confrontation eclipse collaboration? I need your support to confront our family's legacies, she declared, determination edging into her voice. Let us create programs that empower, amplify voices, and redistribute opportunities. If we leverage our resources wisely, programs. He interrupted, his tone shifting towards something more combative. What exactly are you proposing? As she formulated her next steps, Sarah realized she was on the verge of constructing her own identity, one that may include her father but would not wholly depend on him. I want to establish platforms for engagement initiatives that highlight their stories and find solutions, but I need your connections and your influence. Together, we can make a real impact. Another pause followed, laced with the complexity of allegiance and ambition. Would he step away from his traditional views for her? Let me think about it, he finally offered, though uncertainty hung palpably in the air between them. As they ended the call, Sarah felt the intricate tapestry of purpose take a preliminary shape. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. Would he really support her, or was this a mere concession to pacify her emboldened spirit? A wave of mixed emotions surged through her. What if he viewed her ambition as a threat instead of an ally? Questions loomed uncomfortably, pushing her to confront her own readiness to persist, even against familial waves of skepticism. Maybe her journey hadn't just been about seeking understanding but about changing the narrative altogether. With a deep sigh, she could almost sense the stirring winds of change at her back, propelling her toward new confrontations. Was she prepared for what lay ahead? Would she be strong enough to face the new challenges, both external and internal, that awaited her in this uncharted territory? The glow of her phone screen faded into the background as Sarah set it down on the kitchen counter. The familiar hum of her family's upscale home felt oddly stifling now, an echo of her father's influence wrapping around her, reminding her of expectations. She leaned against the counter, hand lingering beneath her chin as her thoughts spiraled with uncertainty. How could she translate her convictions into actions that resonated without judgment? Determined to refine her vision, she grabbed her notebook, flipping through pages filled with hastily sketched ideas from countless sleepless nights. One line stood out, "Turn stories into solutions." The phrase pulsed with urgency, leaving Sarah wrestling with its implications. What did it mean to truly turn a story into a solution? She needed a strategy that would merge her passion with impact, but how could she approach the complexity of an initiative that resonated with her family's legacy? part of her contemplated ways to initiate small local discussions. Perhaps a series of informal gatherings, where diverse voices could share their experiences and explore solutions collaboratively. But apprehension surfaced. What if the idea fell flat? Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing the naysayers, the voices of doubt that might echo her father's skepticism. Was she prepared for the backlash, not just from him but from others who might question the validity of her newfound purpose? With a deep breath, Sarah dove deeper into her thoughts, away from the nagging doubts that gripped her. She remembered the stories of people she had met, families who struggled with relentless obstacles. These were not just statistics, they were narratives burdened with resilience and dreams. She had spent time listening, taking their struggles to heart. It was time to craft a narrative that spoke to the potential in those struggles. How could she structure her idea into a tangible plan? She grabbed a pencil and began writing. Host workshops on storytelling, leverage her father's contacts in the corporate world to gain credibility. Secure resources that help people articulate their challenges and aspirations. For every voice silenced, a solution awaits. If she could only connect the two. The realization that she could bridge that gap ignited something in her. But it also posed questions about her authority. Was it her place to lead this initiative? Sarah shook her head resolutely. This wasn't about authority, it was about empathy. The tools she amassed from family privilege could flourish if used for collective empowerment. Suddenly, the shadow of doubt shifted. She faced a fork in the path, to remain in the safe harbor of her father's world or to risk venturing into uncharted waters where her ideas might flourish in their own right. With renewed energy, Sarah crafted an email and typed out a message to Rosalind, a community organizer she had met at a seminar on social change. She hit send almost immediately, a simple yet powerful step toward ensuring that her ideas began to materialize. Waiting for a response, she felt a weight lifting slightly, a nascent determination replacing uncertainty. The night deepened, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something monumental. The remnants of her father's skepticism intertwined with the excitement of what lay ahead, creating a chaotic swirl of motivation. She knew as she looked toward her aspirations, she would not face the coming days alone. The path was challenging, undeniably fraught with confrontation, but like a fire ignited, Sarah felt the heat of purpose warming her resolve. Yet, she sensed she was at the brink of another revelation, one that might propel her journey further than inertia alone would allow. Who else could she enlist to bolster the momentum she sought? It was time to identify allies beyond confrontational boundaries. Just as she settled her thoughts on this new direction, a message popped up on her screen. Rosalind had responded almost immediately. The words glowed back at her, "I'd love to help you develop this vision, but let's discuss your father's potential impact." A deep pit formed in her stomach. Might her father's influence provide aid or morph into a liability? The tangled web of support and challenge loomed larger than ever, and she was on the verge of finding out just how prepared she was to navigate it. That moment, the impending confrontation with her father began to feel less like an obligation and more like a defining choice. Would she stand firm or crumble beneath his skepticism? Inside, Sarah felt the rising tide of her own convictions, readying for what lay ahead as she typed back a response to Rosalind. Would she be able to uphold her vision while easing into the complex territory of familial expectations? As dawn broke, flooding her room with soft light, Sarah woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The echoes of her recent conversations played in her mind, intertwining with her vision of a new future. She was on the precipice of change, not just for herself, but for others who had been voiceless for far too long. That day, she made a decision. Today was the day she would propose her initiative openly to her father. No longer was she just the daughter seeking approval, she was a woman ready to challenge a legacy bound by privilege and silence. She dressed deliberately, choosing a simple yet elegant outfit that reflected her newfound authenticity. Taking a deep breath, she called her father to request a meeting, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed the call button. When he answered, she could hear the mixture of curiosity and impatience in his voice. "What is it, Sarah?" "I want to talk about the initiative I've been developing." "It's important," she asserted, steeling herself against the apprehension coiling in her gut. Fine, let us discuss it over lunch. As the hours trickled away, anticipation gnawed at her. She arrived at the upscale restaurant, settling into a plush seat, scanning the room filled with affluent patrons. The familiar ambience of opulence felt isolating now, a stark reminder of the values she was beginning to question. When her father arrived, he surveyed the surroundings with his trademark confidence, but there was something vulnerable in his demeanor as well. They exchanged small talk, yet the tension hovered between them like an unresolved chord, waiting for resolution. Finally, Sarah summoned her courage. "Dad, I want to propose an initiative focused on bringing stories to the forefront. I believe we could create a platform for those whose voices are often drowned out by the narratives of success and wealth." He raised an eyebrow, a skeptical look creeping over his face. "And you think this will help our family?" "I think it could redefine our legacy," she replied, meeting his gaze with conviction. "It's not about abandoning our history, it's about evolving it." She laid out her vision: workshops that allowed individuals to share their experiences, partnerships with local organizations, and leveraging their family's influence to create real change. "Imagine your name being associated not just with power, but with empowerment," she articulated passionately. Her father listened, the initial disbelief morphing into contemplation. "You've changed, Sarah. This idea of yours, it seems ambitious." His voice held a mix of curiosity and concern, but also recognition. "But can you really navigate the implications of such a venture?" "I can, and I will," she asserted, her tone unwavering. "We can do this together. It's time to use our positions to uplift instead of control." In that moment, Sarah saw the flicker of understanding traverse her father's expression. He sat back, deep in thought. She could almost see the gears turning as he processed her vision against the weight of his own expectations. "All right," he finally replied, his voice firm yet tinged with trepidation. "But we'll have to do this properly. I'll provide resources, but you need to be prepared for the challenges ahead. This won't come without scrutiny." A thrill surged through her. This was not mere acceptance, but acknowledgement of her position as a leader. "I understand, Dad. I'm ready to face whatever comes." As they left the restaurant, the air outside felt different, charged with opportunity. With her father's support, Sarah knew she had crossed a threshold, a definitive moment that would shape their relationship and the way she approached her legacy. Days turned into weeks as the initiative took shape. With the necessary backing from her father, Sarah became a bridge between worlds, galvanizing her community to share their stories and harness their collective strength. Each workshop cultivated a vibrant tapestry of experiences, unearthing narratives that often went unheard. The turnout exceeded her expectations. People began pouring in from the community, eager to share and learn. The initiative became a movement, fostering collaboration and resilience. Sarah watched as lives transformed through empowerment, and her heart swelled with pride as she helped cultivate change. At one of the workshops, her mother attended, observing quietly at first. When it was time for her mother to speak, Sarah saw her eyes glistening with a mix of pride and uncertainty. "I never understood the weight of our legacy until now," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "Thank you for showing me what it means to embrace stories, for teaching me that it's never too late to rewrite our narrative." Witnessing her mother's transformation became the true realization of Sarah's journey. It wasn't about abandoning their family legacy but redefining what that legacy could encompass. With her father's business acumen and her unyielding passion, they opened the door to endless possibilities, validating their collective commitment to sustainable change. Later, as Sarah stood in front of a crowd during a community gathering filled with individuals whose journeys she admired, she realized that she was no longer the silent daughter seeking approval. She had become a catalyst for change, a determined leader who had rewritten her own story while uplifting those around her. In that moment, she felt solid confidence radiate through her, a firm sense of identity grounded in her values. The applause reverberated around her, echoing not just her accomplishments but the spirit of overcoming that characterized the stories shared within that room. As the event wrapped up that night, Sarah left with a renewed understanding of what it meant to lead, drawing from empathy and forging connections across divides. Clarity washed over her, she had completely transformed, emerging from the shadows of expectation into the light of her own potential. This was what personal achievement looked like, authentic growth coupled with unwavering commitment to justice. Not only had she proven herself as a capable leader, but she had also helped others reclaim their voices. And as she stepped into the cooler evening air, Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of her family's legacy no longer suffocating but instead propelling her forward into a promising future. Now is the moment for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you never miss another exclusive emotional story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a real difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey and the choices she made. And share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion of personal overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to show your support for stories that inspire.